welcome back to Storytime with Eric Zimmer. We've covered Walt, Scott, and Kai Nielsen in Volume 2 of Disney's They Drew As They Pleased. Now we've come to a very big chapter, which will have to be split into 4 parts, I think. Sylvia Holland. So you ready? Alright, let's begin. Sylvia Holland. Walt was so impressed with her animal drawings that he hired her immediately to work in the story department. Theo Halliday, about her mother, Sylvia Moberly Holland. The spirit and culture of the times shaped the lives and careers of Disney artists. In 1935, evolving attitudes toward women helped Bianca Majoli become Disney's first female story artist, paving the way for the hiring of Sylvia Holland. A few years later, labor unrest in Hollywood almost destroyed the Disney studio and profoundly impacted the career of the versatile Holland. Sylvia was a jack of all trades who could tackle any assignment with ease. During her time at Disney, she handled story direction, story research, script writing, art direction, scene timing, and more. Her artistic style ranged from the realistic to the ethereal, and from cartoony story ideas to majestic designs. Had her career not been cut short, she would probably have become Disney's first female director. Sylvia's Disney career was marked by an overarching theme: music. She joined the studio when Walt started working on Fantasia and left when the musical years were winding down. Along with composer Edward Plum, she was one of the creative forces of those years. Sylvia Moberly was born on July 20th, 1900 in the tiny village of Ampfield near Winchester, England. Music was part of her life from day one. Her father, Edward Moberly, was a music-loving vicar of aristocratic background. Her mother was the daughter of the village miller. It was a very interesting combination, explained her daughter, Theo Halliday. Mother, I think, grew up with an equal participation in both worlds. Sylvia also developed an early interest in the natural world, which would prove instrumental in her artistic career many years later. Mother learned all about the plants, both garden flowers and wildflowers, and a good deal about nature in general. She acquired a good general education essentially from her father before she even started school. Artistic sensibility dominated Sylvia's personality since her childhood years. When her younger sister Ida and she attended the Farlington House boarding school, Sylvia immediately wanted to act in the Shakespearean plays put together by the 2 old ladies who ran the school. It became an outlet for her sense of fantasy, said Theo, which to her was not only just fun, but was really burning fire in her. I think that there was an inspirational quality to her interest in drama that was almost otherworldly. It was as if she thought, out there is something fiery and important and burning and beautiful and wonderful. And that did something to her which set her apart from ordinary children from a very early age. She was somewhat of a dreamer, and while she was at Farlington, she had begun to take photographs and develop them in the bathroom. She improvised a little dark room of her own. They said that one of the things that she was scolded for at school was for leaving prints soaking in the basin in the girls' bathroom, which the girls all shared. In 1919, after having spent 2 years at the Gloucestershire School of Domestic Science, where she acquired some much-needed sense of focus while also becoming a great cook, Sylvia went on to study at the Architectural Association School in London. When she graduated in 1925, she joined the very prestigious Royal Institute of British Architects. The following year, she married a fellow architecture student from Canada, Frank Holland, whom she followed to Victoria in British Columbia. In Victoria, Frank and Sylvia had a daughter named Theo in 1927 and practiced together as architects. Sylvia used to draw plans with her hands while rocking the cradle with her foot. In 1928, Sylvia, who was expecting a son named Boris, traveled to England, leaving her husband at home in Victoria. While she was gone, Frank developed a bad cold, went out Christmas shopping in bad weather, suffered from a terrible ear infection, and died on December 28th. Sylvia never married again. Both attractive and aloof at the same time, she was independent and determined that she would fulfill her life's mission without having to be dependent on a man. A month after the tragedy, Boris was born. The newborn suffered from the same ailment that killed Frank. After a doctor advised Sylvia to seek a drier climate to save her son, the family moved to California in 1936. She rented an apartment and started to look for a job. Since she did not have an American degree, Sylvia could not practice as an architect in Los Angeles. She was soon hired at Universal Studios by art director John W. Harkrider to design backgrounds for the movies 100 Men and a Girl in 1937 and Mad About Music in 1938. I got a job at Universal Studios because the art director loved cats, and I had a drawing of one in my portfolio. A miracle, wrote Sylvia many years later. Unfortunately, a few months after she was hired, Universal decided to shut down their background department. Once again, Sylvia was forced to look for new work. Winged Horses and Dancing Flowers. In December of 1937, my mother went to see the premiere of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, recalled Theo, and she fell in love with Snow White. She said, "I've got to do that. I've got to work for Disney." That became an intense, passionate desire. She lost no time and she thought, if I want to get into Disney's, I can get in as an inker or a painter, perhaps as a beginning. And so Sylvia studied inking and worked for 3 months at Universal as an inker for Walter Lantz. In August of 1938, she went to Disney and applied for a job, but took the opportunity to go to Walt and show him her drawings of animals, continued Theo, because she had heard then that they were working on something that was not yet christened Fantasia, a concert feature with music. As an architectural student, when the pressure got too great, she'd go to the zoo and draw animals there. Walt was so impressed with her animal drawings that he hired her immediately to work in the story department. Sylvia was jubilant. In a letter to her brother-in-law, Glenn, she wrote, "A lot of unpleasant things have happened, but also one very good one. Namely, that I seem to be in line at least for a swell job, to start on September 6th, and not before it was time, believe me." Sylvia's first big break came swiftly, as her daughter recounted to Disney historian Robin Allen. One of the earliest memories she had of being in the story department is that Walt was striding down the hall outside of the unit where Mother was and saying, "Anybody know how to draw a horse?" And Mother jumped up and said, "I do," because she was an expert at drawing horses. She loved horses. She had ridden horses a lot, and she ran out into the hall and walked along beside Walt, drawing a horse on a piece of paper that she had grabbed. She drew one for him, and he liked it, and so he sent her to work on what became the Pastoral Symphony. She taught the men how to draw the winged horses and the unicorns. She showed the men how to make their hawks go in the right direction and that sort of thing. They were very glad to learn how to do it. She began to show them other things as well. That was the beginning of their coming to her for expertise, which they did all the nearly 10 years that she was there. She knew how things should look and what they were called. By October of 1938, Sylvia was hard at work on the sequence from Fantasia, which started as Cydalise Suite and later became the Pastoral Symphony, the music by Pierney having been discarded and replaced by Beethoven's. According to Theo, she did pictures of the mother and baby horses, and especially the child ones, playing and that sort of thing, quite a bit of which was not used. She came up with lots of gag ideas and also hairstyles for the centaurettes. She had a lot of designs featuring fruit and flowers wrapped around their heads. With her musical knowledge and her deep understanding of natural life, Sylvia was a logical choice to head up the Waltz of the Flowers sequence in the Nutcracker Suite section of Fantasia. She was assigned to the project in December, along with Ethel Kulzar, a former member of the Ink and Paint department who had joined the story department a few months before Sylvia, and who now became her assistant. In December, Sylvia started tackling the project head-on. Inspired by the sketches created a few years earlier by Bianca Majoli and Ferdinand Horvath for the abandoned Flower Ballet, she listed page after page of ideas for scenes and designs. She was struggling to find central characters and a theme for what was still chiefly a Flower Ballet sequence. Sylvia's creativity was boundless, and as would be the case throughout her career, her ideas kept flowing at a swift pace. On December 11th and 13th, advised by ballet dancer Joyce Coles, she was toying with the idea of having the story revolve around three characters: a tall male flower, a white columbine with purple edges, and a pathetic Pierrot, a clown-like character made from a bleeding heart. Just 2 days later, she wrote a synopsis for a story set in a fairy castle, whose hero was a dashing young flower representing the youngest son of a poor but honest woodcutter, who happened to conquer the heart of the White Orchid Princess. And while none of these ideas were retained by Walt during the story meeting a month later, Sylvia was still enthusiastic about the castle idea. Although this time, she suggested it for the Russian dance sequence. The Russian dance takes place in the Tsar's castle, lighted with candles and all wearing costumes, and huge shadows cast by the candles. The Happy Workaholic. The work was inspiring and creative, and Sylvia was very much in charge, as Theo recalled. I believe that it was her idea that the thistles resembled Russian dancers. She and the two women, Ethel and Bianca Majoli, went out and found some weeds growing in vacant lots next to the studio and came back with those and suggested to the guys way back at the Hyperion studio that they could be dancers. I don't want to subtract any of the credit that the men have for those beautiful scenes, but this was the stage when they wandered in and out of each other's rooms and Mother had to hold herself back. She was so full of suggestions, and the men were often at a loss. I'm out of my depth here. This isn't my style. But they grew into it, and she was older than they were, and so she almost mothered them along and encouraged them and talked of beauty and said, "It is beautiful. It is delicate." Her interest in breaking people away from unnecessary restrictions found expression as she broke these men away from the restrictions of the strictly macho image which had been so characteristic of the West and had been so limiting to men. She knew the names of all the flowers, knew how to create a scene in the court of Russia, which was not used in the end, and was at home with the musicians who had a classical music background. And the atmosphere of the studio was friendly and stimulating.